Is God dead?
He can't be dead. He never existed. I wish the same were true of this idiot.
The astronomer Carl Sagan announced that there were two necessary criteria for a planet to support life: the right kind of star and a planet the right distance from that star. Given the roughly octillion planets in the universe, that's one followed by 24 zeros, there should have been about septillion planets, that's one followed by 21 zeros, capable of supporting life. With such spectacular odds, scientists were optimistic that the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, known by its initials SETI, an ambitious project launched in the 1960s, was sure to turn up something soon.
Lie, 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 lie. What they really did was come up with the Drake equation, named after astronomer Frank Drake. There were initially 7 components of this equation. This liar just pretended that there were only 2. You start out with the rate of star formation in the galaxy. You multiply it by the fraction of those stars that have planets, then the number of planets that could potentially support life. Then, instead of stopping there, you consider the fraction of those planets that actually develop life, the fraction of those planets that develop intelligent life, the fraction of those that develop communications technology that we can detect, and the length of time they release detectable signals into space. At the time, they really only had data for the first component. They could only use conjecture for the rest. So they had a high rate of uncertainty. The number of communicative civilizations in the galaxy could be as many as 50 million, but it could also be as few as 50. Nowadays, we have a much better understanding of the first few components. Star formation rate is around 1.5 to 3 stars per year. The fraction that have planets seems to be 1. Everywhere we look, we see planets. The Kepler mission has given us a pretty good estimate for what planets might support life. FP times NE seems to be around 0.4. After that, it becomes speculative again. FL appears to be high because life occurred very quickly on Earth, pretty much as soon as conditions were right for it. But we have the anthropic principle rearing its ugly head, as well as the fact that from a hypothesis testing standpoint, we have 0 degrees of freedom. And that's just life. Intelligent life is a whole other animal, pun intended. It took a long time for even multicellular life to evolve, and even then it took a long time and many extinction events for intelligent life to finally arise. We're also reconsidering the time the intelligent species communicates its signals into space. We're getting away from that, with wired-based transmissions and low-powered Wi-Fi and cellular signals that can't make it out of our atmosphere. Interestingly, all of this has shown us just how uncertain these data are, and the range of uncertainty is now as many as 156 million communicative civilizations in the galaxy, and as few as 0. There just may be no one else to talk to, because if they exist, they may not be communicating in a form that we can detect.
With a vast radio telescopic network, scientists listened for signals that resembled coded intelligence. But as the years passed, the silence from the universe was deafening.
Another lie. SETI has only managed to cover an area of the sky about the size of a postage stamp held at arm's length. And even at that, they could only detect a signal originating within a couple of dozen light years. And even at that, they could only detect a signal strong enough to be meant for us to receive, not just receiving a straight television broadcast or something. Even with that best case scenario of 156 million, we still would not expect to have detected one by now without getting really lucky. Consider this. If there were a planet identical to Earth with our same communicative technology that we had in the 1970s when we were putting more signals into space than ever, it would still be below SETI's detectable levels. That's right, we couldn't even detect ourselves. By the way, there's something else throwing a monkey wrench into the L factor. We are encrypting our communications more and more. If the aliens are going the same way, then they'll be working to encrypt all of their communications. The whole idea of encryption is to make the transmission indistinguishable from random noise. But SETI is looking for repeatable patterns to conclude that a signal is the result of intelligent life. The whole point of encryption is to cover up those patterns, especially the repeatable ones. So if SETI did detect an encrypted signal sent from intelligent aliens, they'd just shrug and move on, considering it far more likely to have a natural source.
As of 2014, researchers have discovered precisely bupkis.
Bupkis is spelled with a P, moron. By the way, the word bupkis is the Yiddish word for goat droppings, but the only goat droppings I see here are coming out of your mouth.
What happened? As our knowledge of the universe increased, it became clear that there were, in fact, far more factors necessary for life, let alone intelligent life, than Sagan supposed.
That's a lie. I went over the other factors.
Peter Schenkel wrote in a 2006 piece for Skeptical Inquirer, a magazine that strongly affirms atheism, in light of new findings and insights, we should quietly admit that the early estimates may no longer be tenable.
Wait, so you knew about this? You knew that scientists no longer regarded the initial estimates as accurate? But you constructed your argument around them anyway? I don't think you realize what you've done here, Metaxas. You just admitted that the entire basis of your argument is a lie.
Today, there are more than 200 known parameters necessary for a planet to support life, every single one of which must be perfectly met or the whole thing falls apart.
Geez, you people are still clinging to this long-debunked fine-tuning argument? I guess I'll have to take it apart one more time. There are two aspects of the fine-tuning argument, that the universe is fine-tuned for life, and the Earth is specifically, meaning that only Earth can ever harbor any life. So creationists look at a lot of parameters like the gravitational constant and say that if these parameters were off by even a bit, stars and planets couldn't even form and there wouldn't be any life. They say that if you model the universe in a computer, you'll see it fall apart with the slightest modification. What they don't do is actually show you such a simulation. So physicist Victor Stenger actually tried it. He modeled 100 different universes in his computer, and he found that you could actually play around with these different numbers quite a bit and still get life to form. Another physicist, Fred C. Adams, didn't like Stenger's approach since Stenger started with the constants as they exist in our universe and modified them, giving his simulations an advantage. So Adams did his simulations with random values and still got universes capable of supporting life 25% of the time. By the way, you can see all of this and more with sources to the original scientific papers in my book, How Evolution is Scientific. Hey, if they get to hawk their books ad nauseum, surely I get to mention mine once. The other form of fine-tuning is the parameters the Earth has for temperature, seasons, and so forth. If you change any of these, you'll cause mass extinction. But that's because we're talking about life that evolved in these conditions. The Earth isn't fine-tuned for life. Life is fine-tuned for the Earth. And as physicist Bob Park pointed out, if the universe was designed for life, it must be said that it is a shockingly inefficient design. There are vast reaches of the universe in which life as we know it is clearly impossible. Gravitational forces would be crushing, or radiation levels are too high for complex molecules to exist, or temperatures would make the formation of stable chemical bonds impossible. Fine-tuned for life, it would make more sense to ask why God designed a universe so inhospitable to life.
Doesn't assuming that an intelligence created these perfect conditions in fact require far less faith than believing that a life-sustaining Earth just happened to beat the inconceivable odds?
No, because as I've pointed out, the odds aren't inconceivable. And I didn't even get into ways that life might arise on non-Earth-like environments. We know that there are seas of liquid methane on Titan. Although there's no evidence of life there that we've found so far, there is a known set of chemistry detailing how life might arise in liquid methane, just like it can in liquid water. That would open up a whole new category of habitable planet, with a greater Goldilocks zone around a greater number of potential stars such as red dwarfs, and even a greater range of pH to play around with. It's important to understand that our concept of life is very egocentric. It's life the way it happened on Earth. It's not our fault, it's just the only one we happen to know of at the moment. But real scientists are looking into new possibilities and expanding our sense of the universe beyond our ego, just like they've always done. Whereas ignorant, dishonest bums like Metaxas desperately cling to their egos and make the universe small enough to encompass only them because that's the way they can feel special. Because they have nothing else to recommend themselves. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, why not hit like and subscribe? And to make sure I can keep producing content, support this channel by becoming a patron. And check out all the other great content here, like this video selected especially for you.